Hello, MCU fans. Today is going to be my breakdown and reaction to Loki Season 2, Episode 6, the finale to a fantastic season, maybe the finale to the series. It's not real clear at this point. I mean, if we don't get another season, I would be okay. This ended really well, but I do hope we get more. But yeah, there will be lots of spoilers, so make sure you've seen the episode first. But assuming you have, let's dive right in and see what we can find out. We are running the contest all throughout November. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave a comment. One random winner will be announced on a video in early December and can choose from one of the books or steel books above. Best of luck. All right, so I'm going to review one last time how I think the multiversal model is set up and also a counter theory. And I want us to keep those in mind as we go through the video and look for clues as to which maybe what they're indicating is the case. So I'm a believer that there are multiple Big Bangs and that each Big Bang results in a set of Infinity Stones because those control the physics for each universe. And that's important because we know that we have Paint and Noir and Cube and animated, some crazy universes, and of course, the live-action universes. And there may be multiple live-action universes, for example, or multiple animated, each with their own Big Bangs. But for certain, we need one for each of these types of universes because of the physics involved. Then you have timelines coming off of those universes. Now, technically, a timeline is a universe because obviously it's a copy of the original universe with the only deviation being the nexus point. But the key is they're anchored to the original universe. So if you have a branched timeline off of the Paint universe, it's tethered to that universe. That's different than a completely different universe. So America Chavez can jump between different universes. However, as we've seen in things like Endgame, you can only jump between the branches in your universe, but you can't jump between universes. So it's really important this distinction exists, at least that's my opinion. So you end up with a model like this, where I think each of the Kangs came from a different universe, the three main Kangs, and of course, He Who Remains. And He Who Remains even said they all came from different universes, so I think that really fits well. Then, to protect himself, I think He Who Remains created the loom that encased the sacred timeline and all of its branches so that the other Kangs couldn't get to him. And he was spared from the Multiverse of War kind of by hiding from it, to be real honest. However, as we see at the end of this season, as I predicted, the loom is gone. And with the loom gone, we now see more branches. And I think those branches will start interweaving, if you will, and forming bridges between other universes, thus creating the incursions and thus letting those Kangs know about our universe. So, one key reason that I feel this is because in Quantumania, those three men Kangs, remember their conversation. So, the exiled one is dead. You sure he's dead? Well, if it wasn't true, I wouldn't call you. Must really eat you up that you're not the one who killed him. None of us killed him. They did. And I think the they is referring to 616 in general, for the record. But here's the real key. They're referring to a multiversal war that occurred before the sacred timeline, so sometime in the past. Yet, here they are after the loom is gone, showing up and remembering the earlier multiversal war. So I think the only way that can happen is if they've always been around. How would they have the memory of what happened in the previous multiversal war and of the exiled one, let alone be wanting to kill him, if they just got generated at the end of Loki season, or episode 6 of season 2? However, there is this counter theory, which is there's basically one universe that spawns the multiverse. And so you have each of these, the different Kangs all spawning from this original multiverse. And so during the Loki series, He Who Remains killed off all the other Kangs to win the multiversal war, created the loom, and then when the loom is shut down, boom, you get the rest of the multiverse once again. So keep those two models in mind. I've heard many people espouse both theories, so they're both valid theories, but we'll see whether maybe this episode gives us a final answer. At least I hope. All right, so speaking of that episode, let's dive right in. We begin with the opening credits being rewound, which I thought was really cool. Instead of, exiting, we're entering them now. So we're entering inside, we're seeing inside the walls, obviously, going past the time heist there, going now to the comic book pages, and finally to the earlier comic book pages until, boom, now we're in the episode. So that was a really cool way to start. I love how they're doing different things with each of the episodes with the opening credits, whether it's music or stuff like that. Now we see that Loki does his own rewinding because he's going back to the point in time right before Victor headed down the stairs. And so we see him time slipping in, and you can see the little nastiness that always happens whenever he time slips. Only this time it's a little different because he took over his former self. I don't know if maybe he just synced up temporal auras to a certain point in time and space, because that both is necessary to go somewhere in time and somewhere in space. But either way, this is different because in previous episodes in this season, we've seen kind of this closed loop thing where he goes into the past and talks to OB about time slipping, and in the future, OB is like, oh wait, someone talked to me about time slipping once. And he goes in the past and talks about the temporal aura extractor, and sure enough, then in the future, hey, it's down there under the shelf, and it's always been there because he created it in the past. So we get this time slipping that creates these clever little closed loops. And I think it's really similar, to be honest, to what we saw in Miss Marvel, which I didn't really like it the first time when that came out, but now I'm kind of like, okay, I get it. I see where it's going, because I do think her bangles are going to turn out to be Kang tech, and that would explain how this closed loop happened. And also, I love this quote from Sama Amanat, who helped with Miss Marvel. She said, yes, we had Avengers Endgame rules that you can't go back like in a consequential way. However, between Endgame and Miss Marvel, another little show came out called Loki, which I was very much a part of figuring out how time could work. And I would say that I think it would have caused that it wouldn't have caused a Nexus event because of the inevitability of it. So it was a closed loop. So I always remember reading that quote the first time thinking, what are you talking about? Why are you referring to Loki? Loki doesn't have closed loops. Loki has Nexus events. Then she goes on to say, so that's what's up. And it was also the fact that a Nexus event is caused by, oh, you know what? I'm going to get shouted out by somebody, either a fan or by Marvel. I can't tell which, but I will say that for me, it made perfect sense, and it fit into the logic that was established in the TVA, which seemed to be the ultimate ruling on time, I think. Well, again, I read that and I'm like, what are you talking about? The TVA has Nexus events. It doesn't have closed loops. So I'm wondering now if she had access to season 2 and understood where they were going to go, and that's why she felt comfortable doing this closed loop. So it's very, very interesting. But yeah, I like it a lot better now. I do hope they explain the bangles to be Kang tech, but regardless, pretty cool. Okay. Also, I'll point out that the time slipping in the finale is different than even this type of time slipping. Notice in this case, he ran into himself, right? There he is twice. And then he, yoinks away before he sees himself. So he's done time slipping where he created a closed loop. He's done time slipping where he literally showed up in the same place twice. But now he's literally taking over a former self. That is insane. So 3 different types of time slipping, and this one clearly, in my mind, being the most powerful, to be able to go back to another point or forward to another point and take over yourself then. Wild. So now he's like, okay, we got to get timely out of here. Be brave, get down the steps, and boom. Of course, he gets toasted. And I love this spaghetti coming in. Ugh, that's just so nasty. So now Loki wonders, what could we have done differently? And OB gives his pat answer, right, that he always says, good question. And then he says, we took too long. So Loki realizes, great, I need to go again, but I need to go faster. And they play that epic disco version of Beethoven's symphony. And sure enough, he's like now running through this as quick as he can. When the doors open, get down the gangway as fast as you can, load the multiplier, hit the green button, launch it, and get back, okay? Keep on moving. Let's go faster this time. This time, says Mobius. I love it. Mobius is the one who keeps noticing this is messed up. It's kind of fun. But yeah, this time, then unfortunately, boom, Victor screams again and Loki groans. So he realizes, okay, the issue isn't just faster. I need to also go back earlier. And this has got to be one of my favorite scenes, from a comedic standpoint at least, in this episode. He shows up in the war room. Miss Minutes, I know right now you're hurt and you're angry, but we need your help in finishing the throughput multiplier faster. And this is so meme-worthy, just the looks on all their faces, including Miss Minutes. How often do you see Miss Minutes going, huh? What just happened? Oh my goodness, that is awesome. So now they're rushing him down the hallway again. Time is of the essence, and Casey's helping this time. But he gets, notice, by the way, you can see skin on the monitor. That's really fun. But once again, Victor gets spaghettified. This time now, Sylvie's helping. And Loki says, I wasted time, and now time wastes me. But Once again, oh, and I love this too. He says, don't set the multiplier down. So he's already seeing mistakes that Victor's making, and one of them was clearly setting it down. But nope, he gets spaghettified, so Loki says, again, and he gets spaghettified again, and Loki says again, more spaghetti, until finally Loki realizes, okay, not only do we have to try earlier and faster, but I've got to do all the work. So he's going way back in time now to the when they all got together to figure out how to build the throughput multiplier, and they have so much fun punking on this scene. First, Loki says, introductions. Ouroboros, this is Victor Timely. Victor Timely, this is Ouroboros. Guess what? The TVA handbook, you both wrote it. Isn't that amazing? Just flies through that, but still, they take time to shake hands. Aw, so sweet. Hey, nice to meet you. Then Loki's like, here's a model of the loom, which Obi so helpfully mocked up. And we get one more Back to the Future joke, well, kind of reminding us of the one from episode 4, where he says, everyone, Victor, this model is not finished, okay? There's only one coat of paint on it. And of course, that's an awesome reference to Doc Brown saying, please excuse the crudity of the model. I didn't have time to build it to scale or to paint it. And I'm wondering now, does every episode have some reference to Back to the Future? I know at least 4 of them have clear references to Back to the Future, which is awesome since Endgame, of course, said it's all BS. So it's kind of like Marvel's going, okay, we're sorry. We shouldn't have been so harsh. We'll keep referring to the movie. But anyway, then Loki says, looks like Mobius when he holds up the little statue or the little character, but it's actually Victor Timely. And that's so funny because if you remember, in episode 4, they argued about whether it looked like Mobius or looked like Loki. And then he says, wait, why me? Well, because you volunteered. Well, you did. Well, you will. Oh, and then he realizes, oh my, they don't have everything ready yet, and it's going to take them too long. We need to do it faster. So Loki says, hey, how long will it take me to know everything you know about mechanics, physics, and engineering? Oh my word. Let's just assume I don't know much, but I'm a fast learner, and I'm a god. Hiddleston's amazing, by the way. Hiddleston is just amazing. And Obi says, well, that'll take decades. And Victor chimes in with, no, that'll take centuries. And then honestly, the graphic card that is second most shocking in the MCU, the most is 5 years later from Endgame. But I will say, when that came up centuries later, I was like, oh my, they meant it. Centuries. So it kind of reminded me of Bill Murray learning to play piano in Groundhog Day, how he used each day, just a single day, one at a time, to go from having no clue how to play to being like an expert and playing with the jazz band. So cool. But there's a part of me that was like, wait a minute though, centuries? Wouldn't Loki age? I mean, I know gods like from Asgard live a long time, but centuries? But then it hit me. Really what's happening is the same thing we saw in Endgame, where Stark says, hey, instead of pushing Lang through time, you might have wound up pushing time through Lang. And if you remember, in Scott Lang's book, he goes into more detail on this situation, where he came out as a teenager and an old man and a little baby. He said, experiencing life with my fully conscious present-day adult Scott brain, but inside those Scott at different ages of life bodies had changed me. I wasn't really quite the same at all. So the key is Scott, and also Loki now with his time slipping, his mind stays the same, but he's going back in the same body. Isn't that crazy? So I think in Endgame, they discovered the fountain of youth, right? Just keep sending your mind back into an early body. Nope, they don't do anything with it, which is probably good. But Loki, on the other hand, yes, he took centuries to learn all that, but his body didn't age but like a couple days, a day maybe even. Wild. So anyway, now he's got it all figured out, rushes them in the room, and they're like, Loki, I'm not questioning your surprisingly advanced engineering skills, but maybe Obi should test that thing first. But nope, Loki is certain it's going to work, and then heads over to the temporal scanner. We have to scan your temporal aura in this fine machine. Clearly, Victor's a little worried about it, so, Loki sticks his head in himself. And I was honestly a little worried, like, what's going to happen? But nope, it just complains, access denied. Whew. So then Victor sticks his head in, and then Loki walks through all the things that he's learned that Victor screwed up from previous times. By the way, remember, tape your right thumb, left knee, and your faceplate, or the temporal radiation will peel your skin off. Watch the first step, trip hazard, thumb, knee, faceplate. So clearly all these things have happened. Whatever you do not set the multiplier down or it will roll off the gangway, okay? Don't forget. Poor Victor. And then this is kind of fun too. I don't know how Hiddleston rattled off all this stuff. But so they're complaining about, Hiddleston saying, hey, route it to the primary component or compartment. And Casey's like, won't it overload? And then lickety split. He says, no, allow it to interface with Timely's adaptive exponential computing system. My goodness. The stuff he spouted off was just crazy. This guy deserves an Emmy. He deserves an Emmy. But anyway, so Loki thinks he's got it all figured out now, and he's helping little Victor down. Be brave. You're being so brave. Sounds like me talking to my son. And just Sylvie's head cocked to the side going, what is going on? And then I'll be honest. I had assumed, because I made this prediction for several videos now throughout this season, that there's no way this season ends with the loom in place. The loom has to come down or we don't have the multiverse saga. However, I was still really pulling for the dude. I'm like, okay, I want the loom down, but still, he's working so hard. And then he gets there. He finally gets there, sticks the thing in there, and now it's time to hit the button. And then, of course, everything's a problem, right? He tries to hit the button, it doesn't work, and Loki's like, oh, okay, it can be a little sticky. So he hits it again, and it shoots in and makes the same cheesy noise that it's been making in all the demos where they walk through it. If you listen real closely, you can hear this cheesy of it shooting out. Uses the exact same sound effect. Too funny. And then I'm like, okay, so he's not going to make it back, though. He's going to die out there. They're going to do it to him. Nope. He slowly gets all the way back in, closes the doors, and throws us with the pumpkins. And I was like, pumpkins? What on earth is that? Well, Google, right? Get on Google and get on Reddit, and you get the answer to everything. So it turns out that in the 19th century, the term pumpkins was an expression people would use if they saw or experienced something that was considered awesome, exciting, or terrific. And as B.H. Lombardi says, since Victor came from the 1890s and seeing what he had just witnessed in that moment, I'd say that qualifies. Okay, there you go. Pumpkins. I've learned a new word. But anyway, everything looks good, right? Did it work? Wizard. I think it's so funny. Timely refers to him as a wizard. But did it work, Wizard? You did it. You did it. Yes, it worked. It's all working now. Well, until it doesn't. So suddenly then the loom starts to overload again. And then Loki in frustration is like, I've done everything. We increased the throughput. The multiplier was perfect. And then they get the bombshell. It did increase the throughput, but there are just too many branches, which honestly is what I've been theorizing, that no matter how hard they tried to expand it, it was never going to be able to contain all these branches. They either have to prune them or the loom's going to fail. There's just no other way around it. And then we get the scientific explanation, which was pretty cool. The branches of time are duplicating and expanding at an infinite rate. The loom will never be able to accommodate and for an infinitely growing multiverse. You can't scale for infinite. Now, for anybody who's been thinking as we've been going through this, oh yeah, the two different models, which one is the right one? The fact that he said multiverse here, that does lend itself to this, right? The single point that creates the multiverse. The only thing I'm going to say to that is Marvel has really struggled with this term multiverse and universe. They don't use them very judiciously. They don't use them very carefully. And so we end up being very confused sometimes. So I will still point out that if we just take them at their word, this model is the one that fits with this phrase. But I think this is the only time they give any hints that this is the right model. And I'm going to say I don't trust any time they use multiverse or universe. They've struggled so much with those words, and timeline for that matter. But nonetheless, I'm trying to point out even stuff that goes against my theory. And in this case, the multiverse is an interesting choice there that they used. I would also say they don't even know what the multiverse is, really. I mean, all they know is that you have a universe and lots of branches. So maybe that's why he referred to it as a multiverse. But nonetheless, that lends itself to this theory. But okay, moving on. So the loom will always fail. And then I feel so bad for Victor. It's a sad look on his face when he just says, I'm sorry. And then boom. It's all coming again. And Loki's standing there thinking, what do I need to do? How do I fix this? Well, we go back to here. We go back to the source of the problem. It was Sylvie killing He Who Remains, or so he thinks is the main problem. So should we see her swinging that blade again in slow motion? And this is from first season, episode 6, where he says, stop, Sylvie, stop. And then what's interesting is, and I had not noticed this before until we got to this season and it became so important. Notice there's the TemPad on the desk, and He Who Remains had scooched it forward. I think he wanted Sylvie to take it. If Sylvie was going to win. Now, if Loki won, Loki takes over the TVA. But if Sylvie wins and kills him, he wanted her to take that TemPad and use it on Loki. So here's the shot then from this season, season 2, episode 6. Kind of cool. It's just from the other side. Same lines, but there you can see it sitting there on the desk, tempting. But you know what's weird? The light is so different, and we'll see in a moment there's a fire that's now going. So I don't think they're trying to say something with that other than they didn't like how it was lit the first time. So my opinion, leave it in the comments if you don't agree, but I don't think that's of any significance other than it was just really dark. So anyway, now at this point is when Loki time slips in, takes over his self at that point, and then tries to convince Sylvie, you can't kill him. You must not follow through. It all ends if you do. Now, I kind of wondered why he didn't have Sylvie just, charm him and enchant him and see that he's telling the truth. But I also kind of wonder at this point, Sylvie didn't care. She would think it's all a trick. She wanted the guy dead. This was her chance to finally get him. So I do think no matter what, she was going to try to kill He Who Remains. But it is interesting he didn't even suggest it. But nonetheless, she says, you just want a throne. And he says, no, the last thing I want is a throne. Which is amazing because you remember when he came in, he did want a throne. And in fact, him in the original timeline, because remember he came from during the Avengers movie, during the time heist, but 2012. However, in the original timeline, he did end up getting a throne in Thor: The Dark World, remember? And of course, he was pretending to be Odin. But even then, we saw that within a few years, he was a terrible leader. That, he wanted this throne so badly, but instead he became hedonistic, eating his grapes and doing plays about how cool he was and how much everybody loved him when he died. So he really, really wanted a throne for the wrong reasons, but he really, really wanted a throne. So it's interesting that he's finally at a place where now he doesn't want it. So that's very cool. But Sylvie just lays it on the line. If you want to stop me, you're going to have to kill me. And yeah, I did wonder, isn't there some way that he could have stopped her without killing her? I guess, but you could argue she'll never give up. She will never give up. So you just kind of have to assume that this is an ultimatum. You're not going to stop me. I'm going to kill him, or you're going to kill me. So then we get into a little bit of a fight. She blasts him away because Loki doesn't want to kill her. And then we have He Who Remains doing the see you soon. And then they get blasted. She blasts him again. And there's the fireplace, by the way. You can now see that that's lit. And once again, see you soon. And then even Loki goes back a little earlier in the elevator, and she tries to kill him there, but he ducks out of the way because he knows Loki's going to stop her. And notice Loki saying, hear me out, hear me out. But then finally, when nothing's working, Loki turns to He Who Remains. I love that. And goes, why don't you ever try to stop her? Fight back. Do something. And that's when He Who Remains gets interested in the conversation. So he, flicks his little TemPad, freezes her in time, and decides, okay, we'll have a conversation about this. So he says, you're not telling me you haven't learned how to pause time yet, have you? So he's basically saying, you're time slipping, sure, but you don't know how to pause time? Well, maybe you haven't figured out as much as I thought you had. Because he says, I know all about your time slipping. And who do you think paved the road? So this goes with the theory that I had last week, which is that time slipping was not just an accident, but was intentional. I think He Who Remains programmed that TemPad so that if the temporal aura of Loki went through a time door, he would be time slipping, and he programmed where the time slipping would go. But we'll talk more about that when I kind of wrap up the whole, not just the season, but the whole series. But nonetheless, he paved the road on that. And then I love this. He says, did you really think I was just going to sit back and let her kill me? R.I.P. HWR. So I don't feel bad using HWR in my heading there, because he did. R.I.P. HWR. Reincarnation, baby. Which is fascinating. This totally changes the meaning behind reincarnation, baby, his original line. Before he had said that, hey, if you don't stop the branching, there's going to be a multiversal war, this all happens again, and I end up right back here. reincarnation. However, now he's pointing out, actually, no, I never planned on dying. My reincarnation is you're going to keep coming back until I stay around. So it's really interesting how they took the lines and the framework of the first season and totally turned it on its head. Such good writing, such good writing. But that's when Loki goes, oh, and what makes you think this is the first time we've had this conversation? And he freezes time. So actually, he did know how to do it. He Who Remains was kind of chiding him like, oh, you haven't figured out how to do it? Oh, no, he knows how to do it. So now He Who Remains is really surprised. Okay, then let's really have a conversation. So first he says, tell me how is Victor, and then stutters Timely, which is really funny because sure, it's He Who Remains mocking Victor Timely, one of his variants. I get that. But it's also Jonathan Majors, in a meta way, mocking his own performance. Because some people have said it was a little over the top, the stuttering was too much. I thought it was cool. I loved it. But he's almost saying, like, mocking his own performance, which is really funny. That's just brilliant writing again. But then he says, here's the bomb drop, right? The temporal loom is a failsafe. When the loom is overloaded with branches, it deletes the ones that aren't supposed to be there, everything except the sacred timeline. So basically, if it blows up, if you stop pruning the branches, it's going to blow up and it's going to reset and it's going to start all over. And the TVA, that's just collateral damage. So yeah, Loki's laughing, not a happy laugh, but like, oh my gosh. So yeah, there isn't a solution. It basically says, hey, look, it's no biggie. It's easy to rebuild the TVA. And now this gives a little more context to the voiceover we heard from the automated voice in the previous episode, where it was saying TVA code 1229, fail-safe mode initiated. Thank you for your service. So basically, they weren't going anywhere. They weren't going to get saved. Everybody on the TVA at that point was about to get demolished. And we'll go back to the sacred timeline, and they'll all get recruited again. So, wild. So, then he says, and as you may or may not know, my variants are already out there. That line is huge, huge. Already. So at this point, right now, while the loom is still intact, it's hurting, right? It's suffering, but it's still intact. He says, my variants are already out there. He's talking about these guys, his whole coliseum of variants. So this definitely seems to go with this viewpoint. I mean, I don't see how else to take this line other than while the loom is still intact, so it's not branching out, it's not creating the, linking in with the multiverse, these guys are out there. I think that makes sense also with the fact that they remembered all of this, that when the loom goes away, I think he's the exiled one they're talking about when they're so mad about him. But either way, I think they're out there, and that's what he's saying. So while that multiverse line we talked about earlier was interesting, you could argue that was either bad writing or that was Victor Timely not really knowing what the multiverse is. This line, I don't know how you get around it. I just don't know how to get around this. They're already out there. Then Loki says, well, we'll find them. And He Remains says there's too many. And Loki says, I won't stop. And he says, look, the loom prevents a brutal war where nothing survives, Loki, not even the sacred timeline. And again, that brutal war happens because the variants that are already out there, when the loom goes away, they all attack. I don't think they're all going to be recreated from scratch. They're already out there. My opinion, this is my opinion. I respect anybody that has different theories, but we have to look at these lines and reconcile them with our theories. So anyway, he basically says, hey, I made the big choices, the tough choices, and that's why I get the big chair, which is interesting because Loki, of course, will ultimately get the big chair in the end. But Loki says, I'll find another way, to which He Remains is like, around and around and around we go. Basically, dude, you can try all you want. There is no other solution. You're going to do it my way, or it's all gone, or it all resets, right? But either way, I win. Either way, he's saying, I win. So he's saying, make the hard choice. Come on. Break the loom, and you cause a war that kills us all. Game over. Or kill her and protect, and we protect. That's interesting, right? We protect what we can. I heard those we words and thought, I remember you don't do partners very well. So I suspect just like he betrayed Renslayer and betrayed Miss Minutes and pretty much everybody, he'll betray Loki. So I don't know if Loki's thinking about that, but nonetheless, he don't do partners. So now Loki has to decide what to do. And I think at this point, he's seriously considering that he needs to kill Sylvie, that he just doesn't have another option. So he goes for advice from his two most trusted people, the first being Mobius. So I love how they overlay this line from the first season, episode 1, but with what's happening, and it's perfect context. What are you going to do? Says Mobius. And Loki, still Loki, not time-slipped Loki, but original season 1, episode 1 Loki, says, claim my throne, where he's still focusing on that throne. He says, you want to be king? I don't want to be, I was born to be. Very interesting, right? Then Loki time slips in, our current Loki, time slips into the body, and now, isn't it interesting? Look at how, cocky and just ticked he looks there, and such good acting. Now look how desperate he looks on his face. You can almost see tears in his eyes. I mean, he just has been going through so much. But he says, Mobius, I need your help. How do you choose who lives and who dies? And then Mobius tells him this very interesting story about 5,000 deaths that were not in the proper flow of time. So he's basically saying 5,000 people are going to die. However, the variant that they have to prune is an 8-year-old boy. Yikes. And he says one of the hunters, who Loki ultimately figures out is Mobius, and who had never had trouble pruning before, he had never hesitated, but that day he did. And you have to wonder, maybe did he hesitate because he remembered his kids on the sacred timeline? Because you remember how we've seen little elements of their original personalities coming through. Maybe that was a moment when he's like, I can't, I don't know why, but I have this affinity suddenly for this poor innocent kid. But because he didn't prune him right away, the timeline started to branch, more variants appeared, and it happened so fast that his partner, who we ultimately will learn is Renslayer, had to step in and prune the kid. You gotta keep the big picture in mind. So think about that. Mobius is literally giving him advice, without realizing it, to kill Sylvie. He's saying sometimes you gotta prune the one person who may be innocent, in this case, like the kid was, or you can decide whether you think Sylvie's innocent, but really, after all she suffered through and how she was treated for centuries, yeah, she's innocent. She's just mad. She's really mad. But anyway, you gotta sometimes make the prune and keep the big picture in mind. I love this then. Most purpose is more burden than glory. Interesting line, right? Just unpack that for a second. Because remember, Loki kept talking about his glorious purpose. And basically Mobius is saying, actually, it's a glorious burden. It's more a burden than a purpose. Wild. And he says, and trust me, you never want to be the guy who avoids it, because you can't live with the burden. Man, so tell me your opinion if you disagree, but I think after this conversation, Loki was saying to himself, yep, I got to kill Sylvie. I think he was pretty dead set that that was the only answer. But that's the question. Will he have a glorious purpose, or will it end up being a burden? Going back to that line from season 1, episode 1, I am Loki and I am burdened with glorious purpose. He's been searching for that glorious purpose, which now we find out is going to be more of a burden than anything else. But I love the fact that it's kind of a circular Ouroboros in the episode names, because season 1, episode 1 was glorious purpose, and season 2, episode 6, the finale, is glorious purpose. Oh, it's just so cool. And of course, remember old Loki, who had the epic scene in season 1, episode 5, where he, found out what his glorious purpose was, and it was obviously a burden because it cost him his life, but it was his glorious purpose. Such a cool scene. So Loki says then, well, what happened to your partner? And that's when we find out it's Renslayer, because he says, well, she actually became a judge. She's the reason you're here instead of dust in a TVA vent. So interestingly, Renslayer made the hard choice, pruned an innocent 8-year-old kid, and that's the only reason Loki's here. And in Loki's mind, he's now thinking, if I kill Sylvie, that's why everybody will be here. I got to make the hard choice. She knew the hard thing to do was the right thing that had to be done. And these close-ups are so cool. There's no comfort. You just choose your burden. Wow. There's no comfort. You just choose your burden. And then Loki, look at his face. Poor Loki. Just says, thank you, Mobius. and stands up to shake his hand because he realizes he got the answer he was looking for. And then this was a little bit weird because Mobius then spaghettifies, and everything spaghettifies. I don't know if this is because Loki rewound time to a point that now had already been spaghettified, and he was literally holding back time to have that conversation. Or it is interesting that right after this scene, he jumps to this scene, and look who's spaghettifying. It's Mobius. So he goes from spaghettifying here to spaghettifying here. So maybe is that what's going on? I don't know. And I kind of feel like it doesn't really matter. It was just a really cool conceptual scene. But, the thinker in me is like, I want to know why. I want to know why. But anyway, so now he's back here again. And he's talking to everybody as they're slowly vanishing. B-15 screams, and she spaghettifies away. And now Sylvie would be next. She says her line from before, there's nowhere left to go, but Loki stops time and then explains, we're outside time. I've finally learned to control my time slipping. And he explains to Sylvie, we don't have another solution. The loom can't be destroyed. There's no other way around it. We have to preserve the loom. And of course, Sylvie realizes, well, the only way that anything survives is if I never kill he who remains in the first place. It's kind of dawning on her as she realizes, okay, this is where this is going. And then she says, so you have to kill me. Well, I'm not giving you my blessing if that's what you're here for. So yeah, like I say, I think Loki had basically decided I got to kill her. So in a way, Sylvie is the one that solved the problem because she says, do you really want to be the God who takes away everyone's free will? Who are you to decide we can't die fighting? And that's when I think it starts processing in Loki's head. There is another answer. There is another answer. But I love the fact that this discussion is familiar for a key reason, because it's the Civil War discussion. Basically, Sylvie is Steve Rogers, and Loki is Iron Man, is Tony Stark. Because basically Tony wanted the control of the Sokovia Accords. We need to be reined in. We need to be controlled. And Steve was like, no, the surest hand is our own. And we can't have somebody else telling us what to do and what not to do. Just very interesting, this whole order versus chaos discussion, which, sorry, Steve, you're chaos in this example, but and Tony is order. But isn't that interesting? It's the same basic discussion. I love that. So then Sylvie says, you're basically replacing one nightmare with another. I grew up in apocalypses, Loki. I've lived through them, enough of them to know that sometimes it's okay to destroy something. Wow, big time. And that's when it hits Loki, because he says, if there's a hope that you can replace that thing with something better. Now here's the real key. He who remains bet everything on the fact that Loki was going to be selfish to the bitter end, that Loki could never make the sacrifice play, that Loki could never make a decision that would leave him alone. Because that's been the whole key, is he don't want to be alone. But talk about character development. I've heard some people liken Loki's character development to Tony Stark's as two of the best developments we've seen throughout the MCU. And isn't it interesting? Tony also made the sacrifice play in the end. Now, granted, Loki's not going to die, although for all he knew, he could have died. Instead, it's worse in a way. He's going to be forever alone. And I'm telling you, He Who Remains did not see this coming. He did not think there's any way that Loki and Sylvie could come up with a different solution than he had presented. So isn't that just cool? I mean, I don't know. Tell me in the comments who you think now has the best character development in the MCU. No disrespect to Tony, but man, Loki's right up there. He is right up there. But still, you can't beat Stark and his sacrifice. So anyway, very interesting. All right, so now Loki knows what he's got to do. And he comes and takes one last look at his friends who have no idea of the sacrifice he's about to make. And this is just gut-wrenching, the smile that he gives. It's a pained smile, but it's still a happy smile. He's happy, but he's sad at the same time. This guy deserves an Emmy. Please nominate Hiddleston for an Emmy. Such good acting. But then after the little smile, the seriousness comes over his face, because he's like, okay, I'm really going to do this. I cannot believe it. I'm going to do this. So remember, he had said, I don't want to be alone. We learned that in the last episode, that was the big character moment, which I think, by the way, He Who Remains drew out of him. He Who Remains wanted him to realize, you don't want to be alone. because then he thought, there's no way he's going to do what he's about to do. But in its own way, boy, how bittersweet. Because if you remember the time loop that he was stuck in season 1, Sif said, I hope you know you deserve to be alone, and you always will be. Boy, I would feel terrible if a part of Loki's motivation is, I deserve this. I deserve this punishment for the things I've done, and I'm willing to make the sacrifice and take my punishment. Very interesting. And I know this is a little cheesy, but I still have to point this out because I love this cartoon series, and this episode was so amazing. Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, okay? But the Loki episode ended with him being banished and alone. And the scene has stuck with me all these years after seeing it for the first time. He says, so this is how it ends for Loki. And he's screaming as he's now trapped under this force shield in the middle of nowhere. So even in the cartoons, Loki is alone. Craziness. All right, so Loki knows what he must do. And he turns one last time and says, I know what I want. I know what kind of God I need to be for you and for all of us. And this is so cool. This is no way by accident, because those are the same things he tried to tell Odin back in the first Thor movie. He says, I could have done it, Father. I could have done it. I could have been king for you and for all of us. So here we go back to the first Thor movie where he's in utter defeat and not allowed to be king. And now he's taking those same words, for you, for all of us, and he's going to go make the sacrifice play. And then this is even wild. Mobius says no, and Sylvie screams Loki, which is the same 2 words that Odin said, no, Loki. And of course he drops off. And now he walks out, no protection whatsoever. And at first I was like, dude, what? You're going to die. What is going on? But then I remembered that same Thor movie, right? He fell into space and was fine. And then you've also got Ragnarok with Thor, where he basically got blasted with the heart of a sun. These Asgardians are pretty sturdy, but still, oh my gosh, walking out there with no suit on. I mean, it just peels his clothing right off. And instead then, he throws on this super sweet garb. And even the horns come out. Looks so cool. And using his magic, because remember, magic dampeners were turned off, obviously, and he destroys the loom, completely obliterates it, leaving all the branches, hanging out there. In fact, I don't know, somehow he destroyed it, obviously, without destroying the branches, obviously. But anyway, so they're all just dangling out there, and he looks at them and realizes they're dead. And in fact, he tries to enchant one and bring it back to life, and when he takes his hand away, it dies. And even those watching, which is cool, these guys all survive. It didn't hit me at first until I was rewatching this, but yeah, they're all going to be fine. They're all going to create the next TVA. So I'm kind of glad that they know of his sacrifice and they can tell others of this sacrifice. But anyway, sorry, little diversion there. Obi notices the branches are dying. So my guess is they need to be replanted. I mean, if you think of all these analogies they're making of branches, and so something that's in a pot, and in this case, the pot was the loom, right? That was what was giving them their energy and sending them through the circle of time. They've been pulled out of the pot. It's like pulling a plant out and it's got no dirt around it. So now Loki has to replant those branches one by one. In fact, branches, wild, huh? Anyway, one by one, he grabs them, and now he realizes, I wonder if he was thinking, hey, if I could enchant these and I don't need to stay, I could actually go back. There's a chance I could go back to be with everybody. But now for sure, that look on his face, he realizes, nope, it's over. I know my destiny now. And so, the Sylvie realizes he's giving us a chance. So I really hope that if Loki is stuck here for a long time, we know he's going to reunite with Thor at some point, right? That he has to. But with Sylvie knowing about his sacrifice, someone could tell others, including Thor, of what he did, and maybe that's what will bring Thor back to Loki. So we'll see. But I really, really want that reunion. But it's cool that these guys all know his sacrifice. I love it. So he's got his loafers. That's the only fashion choice I don't understand. But hey, he likes it. And it is appropriate to the outfit he's made, but still pretty casual there. Anyway, walks up the steps, opens a portal, and heads in to now his throne. There it is. He finally finds his throne. So then this is such good acting. He grabs those branches and you can feel the weight of what he's doing as he's pulling them and straining to bring them forward. And he's dragging like ton, I mean, I don't know how many that is, ton of them forward until he goes and he sits on the throne and starts to power them up, starts to power them all up. And using his own magic, obviously, to be the tree, to be the plant that is re-energizing them, and obviously does end up being Yggdrasil, basically the living tree, the tree of life, which is fun because we've seen examples of that, we've just never seen it. So in the first Thor movie on the left, we saw Thor draw it for Jane. In the second Thor movie, Selvig in his mental state draws it on the board, and we even saw it more perfectly in Captain America: The First Avenger there on the wall, and that's when the Red Skull found the Tesseract. So yeah, very, very cool. But yeah, this then is one more reason that I think the model that I've been saying fits. I know this is an interview from 2 years ago, so this is Kate Herron after the first season ended, but don't forget, the first season and the second season are directly connected. But read this quote again. She says, so there's branches, right? Which is like the alternative reality. But then something you'll see, it's very subtle, but in the last shot, and she's talking about this, the season finale, where you see the multiverse, there's like basically other bigger physical timeline branches. So it's almost like these different separate trees that are now connecting. So she's making it as clear as can be there. The tree, Yggdrasil, is 616, the sacred timeline. The other trees are the other universes, where the other Kangs were. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's so perfect. But anyway, then she also says it's almost like a bridge. If you can imagine the branch, it's like another reality. But if the branch extends beyond a certain point, it will then connect to the other physical timelines. That last shot we did, there was like thicker branches, and those are meant to be like our timeline, and there's other timelines like that, and the branches are the connectors basically. So what she's saying is the trees will have branches that grow out, and they start connecting to the other trees' branches, and that's where we ultimately get the multiverse, the incursions, etc. So, wow. Yeah, I don't know how to look at this in any other way than that's 616. It can't be the multiverse. It just can't. Because that would mean that Loki created the Paint universe and the Cube universe and the Noir and the animated. It doesn't even make, I mean, this isn't animated. It's not cubes. It's not paint. That's the bottom line. And we know those exist because we saw them in Multiverse of Madness. So I can't see how that one model works. But anyway, nonetheless, that's where I'm at. Everyone can have their own opinion, and I respect it. All right, so then they tell us basically time passes. And we get yet another wild graphic telling us how much time, right? 8 years later. No, I'm kidding. That would be terrible, wouldn't it? Can you imagine if we got 8 years later? Oh my gosh. No, they just tell us after. No amount of time after. So maybe they did that because they got 8 years wrong and it was really 4. So they're like, hey, don't even put an amount. We'll get it wrong. But anyway, after. So what is after? Well, the TVA is back. So presumably everybody who was in that loom room is alive. But I would guess that the rest of the TVA didn't get reset because it didn't blow up. So probably everybody who is still there is still alive. And in this TVA, notice we got the tree there. That's really cool. Let's grow together. Very cool. And now even the monitor looks like a tree instead of the previous timeline, which means I got to change my image. Somebody told me, now you got to turn your image into a tree. Oh, my. I will eventually, but not yet. Anyway, so yeah, the monitor now shows a tree. Very cool. And then there's Miss Minutes. You can't trust Miss Minutes, right? Hi, y'all. I'm Miss Minutes. And they say, are we sure she won't try to kill us? Yeah. And then this is interesting. Why? I was waiting for Obi to go, good question. But nope, he just shrugs. So that's kind of fun. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what that means. It's interesting. So I mean, it's the same Obi, I'm sure. So anyway, maybe it was just a fun way to go, yeah, I don't have to say the same thing every time. So there. Anyway, then we get some crazy lines here that are really important. So B-15 says, I got those reports on the variants of He Who Remains. So we're now seeing that, sure enough, the TVA, as we expected, is going to make sure that they at least prune the variants, the He Who Remain variants. They're not going to prune entire timelines. Well, actually, we don't even know if they're pruning them. We just know they're keeping track of them. Then this one gets interesting. Do any of them know that we exist yet? And they say nope. How do they know that? How do they know they don't know? That's interesting. I suspect they do know. But nonetheless, that's an interesting line. But then this one I think is so key. I guess one of them caused a little bit of ruckus on 616 adjacent realm. So much to unpack here. So clearly they were referring to quantum mania. So some time must have passed because we're now, this is happening after quantum mania happens. They call it 616 adjacent realm. Well, they're referring to the quantum realm. The fact they call it adjacent is interesting. I've heard some people theorize maybe this is meaning the quantum realm isn't the basement to the multiverse. I still think it is. And you can call it adjacent. I mean, it's adjacent to every universe, I think. But nonetheless, they're definitely talking about the quantum realm. But here's the real key. They're more concerned about 616 than anything else. In fact, there's the 616 number for those that don't want it to be 616. I'm sorry. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just reading what it says. But anyway, I think this is the key. The tree of life is the 616 universe. That's what they're worried about, protecting it from all the other variants out in the multiverse. So, also, it's worth noting that these pictures certainly look like the Quantum Mania Kang. I wish I could read the words. If anybody can get a better screenshot, let me know. I don't know why they made this so hard to read. But anyway, it definitely looks like Kang blasting on the top image and then his multiversal core. So they're clearly referring to that one. And again, I think that goes with this model. I think it goes with the model that the TVA, notice I've changed the image for the third one down. It's now the TVA. But their universe is branching out, and they're looking at all the different other variants of He Who Remains, but they're concerned with 616. So, anyway, I just think that's the model. But let me know in the comments. I read and respond to every comment, and I love to hear different feedback. So tell me if you don't agree. And then they say, but they handled it, obviously referring to Hank and Janet and Hope and Cassie. And so we're all good now. So that's, although I still think the dude's coming back. I really think, when he got atomized in that multiversal core, I think he's coming back as the Beyonder. No, I don't think he'll be Caucasian with curly dark hair, but that is the image from the 80s Secret Wars. So he could look like that. But more importantly is he's going to create a battle world, I think. That's just my opinion. But I don't think he's gone. So it's interesting that they dismissed him so quickly to maybe make us dismiss him. But I think he's coming back. Anyway, then Mobius and B-15 walk outside, and isn't it wild? The middle one there is a tree. All along it's been a tree, and we never thought about it that way. Very, very interesting. I don't know if in season 1 they were thinking about it that way, but it works perfectly for season 2. So Mobius says, I got to go see what exactly it is we've been, protecting for all this time. So he wants to go get a look at the sacred timeline. Now, my first thought was, dude, you got to look in episode 5. And I'm like, duh, no, that was a different one. So what am I saying? So yeah, this Mobius has never seen what his life is on the sacred timeline. So he's going to go check that out. First, we get a view of the war room, though. That's kind of cool. Look how inclusive it is now. The judge in the middle there from before. B-15's in there. Casey's there. And yes, even Rip Van Winkle. Clearly, he has finally woken up. Well, I assume he's awake. The dude moves so slow, I don't know. But yeah, that's cool that he finally came back. So very interesting how the TVA is being run quite differently than it was before. We also see that OB has a new book. I'm assuming he wrote it. I don't know why. In fact, it's a second edition. Notice it says, I don't know why he wouldn't have written it, or who would have if he didn't. But it's just interesting, that look on his face as he's looking at it is almost like, who wrote this? But no, tell me what you think in the comments, but I am pretty sure that he wrote this book. So that's very cool. And then we also see, speaking of the book, the Victor Timely, as he looks out at the window from the sacred timeline, no book comes in the window. So he goes about his life as normal. As a candle maker, I still theorize that he did do some writings that ultimately inspired OB. They just weren't the writings we saw in the branch timeline. They were more, rudimentary writings that still inspired OB in 1994 to then work on the book. So it would be really interesting for the writers to tell us what happened in the sacred timeline, because we saw so much in the branch timelines. But nonetheless, we at least know that young Victor has a normal life, and hopefully a happy one. And then we have Renslayer. So this is really interesting. So she wakes up in the void, because of course she was pruned earlier, and we see the pyramid, but also the Sphinx to the right of that. And that kind of makes you think of the Kang variants, because ancient Egypt, certainly a lot of ties to ancient Egypt. Then this is interesting. I guess I wouldn't have picked it up if I didn't have the closed captioning on, but it says rumbling and then metal creaking. Alioth doesn't sound like metal. So there have been some theories I've heard that it isn't Alioth coming, but it's one of the Kangs, that they're coming to pick her up. Interesting. And it could just be they're describing Alioth's noises as metal sounding, but it does sound more like a ship than it does Alioth. So watch that scene again if you don't remember what it sounds like, but watch that and see what you think. But it would be really interesting if there was a Kang coming to get her, because she doesn't seem real scared, and the purple could be the purple from his ship. That's his favorite color. But she doesn't seem very scared. So whether it's Alioth or Kang, she's kind of happy, it seems, or at least waiting, but not running. And then we look down and we see the for all time always. So I wonder if the old TVA building got pruned, maybe, or maybe there's a deeper significance. Tell me what you think, but I'm thinking it's just the previous version of the TVA, because we know it's been pruned a couple times, is now in the void. So interesting. All right, so then Mobius, in a really touching scene, gets to go back and watch his real life on the sacred timeline. Notice the rope isn't coming out the window anymore. So at least Don, I think his name was, took care of that, so that's good. But yeah, there's Mobius standing and watching. And then Sylvie comes up behind him and jokes about the yard needing a bit of work. But Mobius basically says, well, if you never look, you never know. And where are you going to go? Sylvie just shrugs. Don't know. So that's interesting. Kind of leaves it open-ended. We don't know whether we'll see her again or not. But we could. Maybe that's her even saying, I don't know. Is Feige going to call me up? I hope so. I'd like the money. But then Mobius says, I might just wait here for a little bit and let time pass. So my guess is he's not going to do whatever Brad did, which we still don't know how he did it, but where you kind of take over the almost like they time slipped, like Loki's time slipping into his own body. Maybe that's what Brad did. I don't know. Anyway, it seems like Mobius, though, is going to head back to the TVA and just wanted to watch it a little bit and see what was going on. Probably he would feel bad, taking over the other body, because now that person didn't get to live it. So I think he just wanted to see, and let me know what you think in the comments, but I think he just wanted to see what was going on. And then we got Loki, who looks a little sad, honestly. I mean, this is the burden of the glorious purpose. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, he is for sure the god of stories, which that's what they were alluding to. It's interesting. Supposedly Feige, who now has control over the comics as well, seeds the comics with ideas that he's later going to do in the movies differently, but still throws the ideas out there. And this was very popular in the comics. So that is very cool. So yeah, Loki is the god of stories. I think he's stuck there. I don't know if he'll ever be able to get away. Be very interesting to see, but I do hope we see him reunite with Thor, so I hope somehow he's able to get out of there. But okay, so I'm going to really quickly summarize the 2 seasons, because there's even more to glean from this when you look at it as a whole. So this is going to be quick, but it's really cool. All right, so I mentioned in the previous video last week that I strongly think the loom was forcing the universe, 616, the sacred timeline, into a situation it did not want to be in. Literally, like the universe wanted to break free. And Sylvie says it herself. She says it wants to break free, so it manifests chaos, like me being born the goddess of mischief. I think that explains why we got alligator Loki and old Loki and kid Loki, etc., boastful Loki, as well as female Loki. It was the 616 universe fighting to break free of the loom. And we hear it again when Mobius says 2 variants of the same being, especially you, forming this kind of sick, twisted romantic relationship. That's pure chaos. That could break reality, which ultimately it does. The 2 of them together team up because Sylvie is the one that came up with the idea and Loki's the one that executed on it. They do indeed break the loom break reality, and set the universe free. And then this quote from Victor Timely. If you just look at the pieces that tie directly to the loom in the TVA, it inverts temporal decay, lowers entropy, gathers it into fine threads, weaves it into elegant ropes, and here's the key, a chaos transformed into order. So He Who Remains was basically at war with the sacred timeline, forcing it into order when it wanted chaos. Fascinating. All right, so turns out that he's been holding back the chaos all this time, and Sylvie says, hey, we broke out of your little game. And he's like, no, 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 no. Every step of the way that you took to get here, I paved the road. But we're going to see it's even more than we thought. So he basically is flipping a coin here and saying, Loki, Sylvie, you guys choose. You either take over and my life's work continues, or you plunge a blade in my chest and an infinite amount of me start another multiversal war, and I just end up right back here anyway. Reincarnation, baby. And of course, we now learn, no, that's not really the case. He is not going to let himself die. But this is important. Some people have said, well, why would he even walk away, period? Well, remember, he said, when Loki asked, why would you give up being in control? He says, I'm tired. I don't want to do it anymore. But I want somebody else to do it. And so he's grooming Loki for this very role. Everything he's doing is to prepare Loki to take over for He Who Remains, maintain the sacred timeline inside the loom, which of course means pruning untold lives, thousands, millions, billions, trillions of lives. Then we learned in this episode, right? Kiddo, did you really think I was just going to sit back and let her kill me? So reincarnation, baby, meant something completely different, right? And then here's the key. Remember that tempad? I think it was programmed so that if Loki's temple aura went through the time door, which it did, that he would now start time slipping because that tempad, remember, it's a combination of time twisting, and space with the temporal doors. So really, really cool. And by the way, Sylvie still has that thing at the end. So that's interesting. Keep that in mind. But anyway, we saw then how his time twisting was very intentional. In the first episode, remember, he transports to the future so that he knows this situation, this scenario, so that later, when another one of him transports to the future, he sees himself and realizes, oh yeah, I got to prune me. And he ends up being the one, out comes Sylvie, who prunes himself to temporarily stop the time twisting. So the time twisting was very intentional. And he meant it when he said, I promise you, this will make sense. It now does, because we know that He Who Remains programmed this time twisting, at least until Loki learned to control it himself. So this is interesting. Now we know that Miss Minutes and Renslayer were total pawns. Miss Minutes says, the one at the end of time, he told me that we need to put this package in that window. It was his plan, meant to protect all of time. This was the plan he made when he knew the end was near for him. When he's back where he belongs, you and I will be right by his side. No, actually, you won't. He's going to betray you again. But they're being used as pawns to drop this book in the window, right, and make Victor Timely now able to help them when they go and pull him into the future. But here's the real key too. Victor Timely was a pawn. Until this episode, I assumed, the goal, the reason that Victor Timely was given the book is so he can come forward and solve the issue with the loom, right? He's like, oh, look, I've got the solution right here. It's this little device I have. No, because as we learn, you're going to get spaghettified multiple times, but at the end of the day, there is no way to solve the loom. So bringing Victor Timely forward was completely unnecessary, other than He Who Remains wanted Loki to see for himself, you can't fix this. So wow, that whole thing was He Who Remains using Renslayer, Miss Minutes, and Victor Timely simply to get Loki to want to take over for He Who Remains. Craziness, right? So then Loki learns about the automated reset, right? The fail-safe mode. Thank you for your service. Once again, the time slipping is being planned by He Who Remains because he shows up and sees his future self with the book and then goes away, but then comes in the room remembering that he saw himself with the book, so he picks up the book now. So He Who Remains was using him basically to get a hold of this book. Crazy. So then he transports out of here, right? Spaghettification happens. This is programmed yet again by He Who Remains to send him to ultimately see OB or AD Doug. But he basically says it isn't random. So I thought, watching the episode 5, oh, it's not random because Loki's going to the people that he wants to meet. In fact, Obi says that. He says it isn't random because you keep ending up around exactly the people you're looking for, because you're not just time slipping in time or slipping in time, you're also moving around in space. It's like you're a better version of one of those TemPads. So it seemed like this episode was for Loki to meet all the people that he was later probably going to recruit. No, I'm pretty sure that He Who Remains sent him on the branch timeline to meet all these people to say, hey, these are your friends. These are your friends. He was playing into Loki's fear of being alone. All of this was being done to make sure that Loki would see no other option. Now he sees you can't fix the loom, right? He sees that no matter what Victor did, you can't fix it. He also sees he's going to be alone if he doesn't solve this problem. So He Who Remains was just playing him up. So sure, OB says with science, it's all about the how, and the what and the how. But with fiction, it's the why. And of course, the why is Loki finally realizes, what do you want? When Sylvie asked him, he says, I want my friends back. I don't want to be alone. So again, He Who Remains was playing into that fear so that finally this triggers the ability for him in this moment of desperation for him to be able to time slip. And that's where, of course, we got to episode 6, this latest episode, the finale. But of course, he realizes it's not going to work. There is no way to stop it. And the loom is always going to fail. And now he gets that discussion from He Who Remains saying one last time, dude, do you not understand? If you break the loom, you cause a war, it kills us all, game over, or you kill her. Come on, man. Just be done with it. What he didn't imagine, though, ever happening is Sylvie convincing him there's another answer. You don't want to be the God that takes away everyone's free will. You don't want to be the one to decide that we can't die fighting. And Loki makes the sacrifice play, changes the whole game, and boom. That's why He Who Remains loses. So I don't think He Who Remains is coming back. I know some people feel like there's a giant Ouroboros and that after the multiversal war, He Who Remains is coming back. I guess that's possible, but I don't think so. I think Loki, by doing this, defeated He Who Remains' otherwise perfect plan. He Who Remains knew Loki so well, or so he thought, that he thought he could control him. And instead, Loki made this sacrifice play. So cool, right? I mean, if you look at the 2 seasons, such incredible character growth of Loki. Wow. All right. And so that's why I'm saying I really do think that now the TVA is in place to protect 616. We're probably going to see the TVA showing up in other movies, going into Warn Heroes and going into Help. Just my guess. And he says again, do any of them know that we exist yet? Nope. Well, actually they do, and they're coming for you. In fact, we saw that in Quantumania when Cassie said, what's coming? And he said, me. A lot of me. They exiled me down here. They're afraid of me. So they're out there. These guys are coming. They're coming. And I'm telling you, they've always been around. They've always been around because that's what He Who Remains told us. So anyway, one last time, I just think this is the model, but let me know in the comments what you think. And yes, I do need to update it to look more like a tree. I will. I'll turn it 90 degrees on the axis there. And remember, too, it's important to remember, Loki Season 1 and Season 2 happened before the rest of the multiverse stories, the what-ifs, the multiverse of madness, etc., which they tell us in the timeline book. And yes, I know it's absolutely ridiculous that something outside of time can affect something inside of time. It doesn't make sense. None of this does, though. Really, I mean, it's all science fiction. We just got to roll with it. Feige made it clear that Loki Season 1 and Season 2 is what triggers WandaVision, etc., Multiverse of Madness down the road. So, bottom line, this is 616, I strongly feel, and these branches are going to reach out and touch the multiverse, and that's going to lead to all the different incursions and ultimately to Secret Wars. Wow. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this stuff. I really have enjoyed putting this together each week. Oh, it's so much work, but it's so much fun too, to dive so deep into this and try to figure out how it's all fitting together. And again, if you don't agree, tell me. I'm totally cool. I'd love to hear what you're thinking. Don't forget, we do have the November contest. Be a subscriber and leave a comment, and you might get to win one of the books or steel books above. And also, love to have you join us on Discord. I will leave a pinned comment where you can come be part of the conversation. Metaphysics, it's always hopping. It's always hopping in there. Zion Gray, Tori X has made some really good points, but everybody has. It's been fantastic to follow along all the conversation. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we can all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.